everybody! This year is my 10th year in Japan, so I thought I would make a little video about every single job I've done in Japan so far. So everyone's pathway into Japan is different, and everyone's workflow and the different kind of jobs they're going to do are different too. So this is just my particular pathway and the different jobs I've done leading up until now. The first thing you're going to want to do if you're looking for a job in Japan is look at visas. Obviously that's the hardest part of living here. Depending on your country, you can get different kinds of visas, and depending on your skills. If you have a degree, it becomes exponentially easier to work in Japan, and that's why I came after I graduated university and I got my degree. Straight off the bat, I think the best kind of visa you can get is a working holiday, because that lets you do like all different kinds of work, as opposed to me where my visa is restricted. And also you have either 1 year or 2 years, and in that time you don't even have to work if you don't want to, so it's very free. The time 10 years ago when I moved to Japan, working holiday wasn't a thing in the UK, and every year I think they update more and more countries that are eligible for working holiday. So if you're considering it, my first piece of advice would be to look online and see if your country is eligible for a working holiday. So yeah, straight off the bat, the first thing I did was I went on gaijinpot.com and I looked at the different jobs, and gaijinpot is mostly teaching and like tourism jobs. There's a lot of job forums depending on what your specialty is. Like there are a lot of IT jobs and stuff like that, so maybe find the job board that is more specialized to your particular field. Related to my university major, I could have done something in IT, but honestly I really don't want to work in IT, so I decided to just be an English teacher, mostly because I like moving around. I like a job that was different every day, and I just like working with people and working with kids, so I decided to try out being an English teacher. And then that was the first crossroads you come to, is what kind of English teacher you want to be. I think when people think of English teacher, they have like one image in mind, but there are so many different fields and institutions you can work in. You can work in a kindergarten, you can work teaching really baby toddler kids, you can work in an eikaiwa where you're teaching everyone, you can just teach adults, you can work in an actual school, you can work in a university. You can even go to people's houses and teach privately, you can teach online. There are so many different options, and that can be a little bit overwhelming. What I did first, and what I recommend to everyone who's thinking of coming here and being an English teacher, is become an ALT. I was an ALT, assistant language teacher, and I placed at first with a pretty bad company. I've made a video about them before. They're one of the famous black companies for teaching as an ALT. And they're honestly awful, and I think they're still going today despite all the terrible reviews about them. But at that time I didn't know that, so I started working for them, and they placed me in Saitama, and I came over to Japan right away, and yeah, I started working as an ALT. When you initially arrive, depending on the company, they might help you set up accommodation, which is what my company did for me. And here's the thing where you have to be careful, is that oftentimes these companies will have contracts with different apartments and share houses, so they'll get a profit. So sometimes doing that is easier, but it's also more expensive because your company is getting a cut. So you need to think about this. Maybe look at the options they have and see if it's a little bit too expensive. They placed me in a pretty expensive share house, but actually share house was great for me because there was other people in there. It was mostly Japanese people in my share house, which really helped with my Japanese level, and everyone was just really nice. But also, like, there are, in share houses, there's usually a couple of weirdos too, so that's something you gotta look out for. So I started off as an ALT, and I was an ALT in a junior high school, so the kids went from 11 to 15, and the first school I ever worked in Japan is probably my favorite. It was just like a very in the countryside school. The kids were nice, the teachers were nice. An ALT job is very relaxed. Like you'll start work at like 8 or 8:30 and you'll finish work at like 3:30, so just regular school hours. Maybe you'll have 3 or 4 lessons in that day. You're an assistant, so you'll be working with a Japanese teacher who will tell you what to do. Particularly if you're new and you don't really know, you don't really have to do anything. You just have to like repeat things and make games and stuff like that. The more and more experience I got, I started to slowly do more and more and more until I was more of the main teacher and they were the assistant. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. It really depends, and it really depends on the Japanese teacher you're working with. And that was the hardest part of the job, because often the teacher I was working with just didn't like working with foreign teachers and would either tell me to not do anything or just make my job very difficult. So that was the hardest part, but it was also very manageable. I'll say right off the bat that if you're an AOT, more than the company you're working with, the dispatch company, because they have a very little say in the process. They just send you to a school. More than that, your experience will really depend on the school you're placed with, and there's no way to choose that. Like, it's like a lottery. So I've been placed in schools that were good, and I've been placed in schools that I didn't really like. It's honestly, it's just a lottery. So yeah, your whole experience is basically down to like flipping a coin. Also, the first school I worked in was a little bit different because I also worked in the hospital down the road, and that class was a bit unusual because I was teaching it by myself, which is a little bit rare for an AOT, but I was also teaching the children that were too sick to go to regular school, and that really helped me get good experience for the jobs that would come later. I talk about more of these in depth, and if you want me to talk about any of these jobs more in depth later on, let me know and I'll make a solid video for that. But for the sake of brevity and how many jobs there are, I'm gonna speed this up quite a lot. So I actually, as I mentioned before, the company was bad, and I found out why. Because after the 6 months contract was up, and 6 months is also very short, the company said that they had actually lost the contract for that district, which usually happens. It's like the district will choose a company that's like the cheapest or something like that. So we lost we lost the district, and my company is like, oh, we have another job, it's in Ibaraki, so you would have to relocate up north. I didn't really want to do that, so I just didn't sign the next contract, and I ended up moving to Shinjuku and moving in with one of my friends. That was kind of silly because I moved to Shinjuku with like no idea of what I was going to do, so I wouldn't recommend that. I thought it would be a little bit easier to find a job. And so yeah, I arrived in Shinjuku, and for a while I was just applying for jobs and stuff like that. And in that time I also found that there were apps that you could teach private students, so I was doing that. This is another job I did for a little while. I didn't do it too long because if you can imagine, a lot of these apps are just lonely people that are looking for someone to speak to, or people who treat it like a dating service. So I did meet quite a lot of weirdos on this app. I have made a video about this before, but let me know if you would want me to make one more, because this was a very interesting experience and I honestly wouldn't recommend it. But then after a while, I had a Japanese friend, and he had a company where he owned an eikaiwa. An eikaiwa is just like a conversation school, and so we have lots of different kinds of students. And he's like, please come work for me, I can probably get you a visa. And yeah, it would just be, you know, working in a one classroom and just teaching people conversational English. So I agreed. This company was interesting because it was actually in Roppongi, and it was an eikaiwa just for like the rich and the elite. So I ended up teaching a bunch of celebrities. I taught really rich people, like some of the richest people in Japan. And it was interesting because they were very odd and they weren't particularly charitable. Like the woman I taught, I taught her children. And I think honestly, like, she used it mostly as a babysitting service, and there were times I went to her house. There was a time when I went to her house, it was super far, and I ended up getting lost. I ended up taking a taxi, and she wouldn't refund my taxi receipt, even though she's like a multi-millionaire. So yeah, it wasn't a great experience. Again, I wouldn't trust a lot of smaller and startup companies. This was a startup company, and one day the manager, it turned out, just hadn't been paying any of the bills, and all the teachers went to the school and the lights were off and the staff were confused. It turns out that the manager hadn't paid any of the bills. He took all the money and he escaped. And yeah, the school had to close down for a while. The school went under new management and they hired a bunch of new staff to take it over, but I didn't like the whole vibe, and it was just, I don't know, the whole thing was off. After that happened, they also said they couldn't renew my visa because it seemed difficult, so there was just no reason for me to work there anymore, so I decided to find another job. Now this is something that happens quite a lot. This happens to my friends frequently. They'll decide they want to work for a particular company, particularly if it's like fashion or like beauty or art or something that seems appealing. And these smaller companies will say, yeah, come work for me, I can give you a visa. And I think they do this not with a bad intent, or they don't do it maliciously, but it's actually incredibly hard for companies to get visas for their employees, and I think the process is too difficult, or maybe it turns out they are ineligible, and in the end they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't give you a visa. And in that case, I've known a lot of people that were forced to go back to their own countries because they just couldn't get a visa from the company they thought that was going to give them a visa, and it leaves it too close to the time they have to leave and they have to just go home. So this is something that happens a lot, so like please be careful of this. Now at that time I was doing a lot of other smaller jobs. I was doing a lot of modeling for agencies. There are agencies in Japan like Free Wave or Aqua, I think is still running. At the time there was Avocado, but I'm not sure if that's still running. And they would offer you jobs, and I got to be in things like music videos, do hair modeling. I did a lot of kimono modeling. But honestly, for me, it just doesn't make that much money. It's very up and down. Like, the average day price was the same as my teaching job, so it didn't really make much sense. And I really didn't like constantly going to auditions and then getting turned down. And a lot of the auditions are in very random places all over Tokyo, and you have to walk quite a lot and you have to get there very early. It just, for me, it didn't seem worth it because I thought like I'd rather just dress up in my own time and take my own pictures. And I got very tired of people touching me all the time. I had a few weird experiences, and there was one point I did a lot of hair modeling because that's probably the easiest kind of job to get, and my hair started to go really brittle because it was being like combed so much. So yeah, one thing that annoys me is when people are like, oh, any Westerner can become a model in Japan. It's actually much harder. Like, not for me personally because I've never been a full-time model, but I know a lot of women and men who are full-time models in Japan, and it is very hard because in order to get your visa you have to make over a certain amount of money, so you have to go to lots and lots of auditions, and it's very stressful. And these auditions are often very early. You have to be very well prepared. You have to keep your skin flawless. It's a lot more stressful than I think people really understand. And that's why the job personally just wasn't for me. Oh, also because I'm just really short. But I had an Instagram that was getting quite popular at the time, so I did get a lot of influencer jobs. This is anything from like 5,000 yen to eat at a restaurant and post a picture, or there are some really good jobs. This has been one of my favorite things to do, and this is something I've done constantly while I was here. But sometimes the government will pay influencers to go on their little trips, and if you document it, you post a YouTube video or stories, there's normally like a bunch of requirements. The pay is actually really good, and that is one of my favorite things to do. They're kind of scarce. Like, sometimes in a year I'll do 3 or 4 of those jobs, sometimes I'll only do like 1, or sometimes there won't even be any. So again, this isn't the kind of thing you can rely on, but it's a very nice side little job, and most of my income is built up from just like loads of little silly things that I do. I remember I was also doing cosplay a lot, so I did get some cosplay jobs. The problem with that is that I started to work for a company, and I would wear cosplay and I would just give out flyers at events for them, which is a very common kind of cosplay job. And the problem with that is that the manager or owner was kind of creepy, and then one day after the event, they would have like nomikai, drinking parties. I went to the drinking party, and he asked me, he said, if you want to continue doing this job, you have to be my girlfriend. And I thought he was joking, so I said no, and then he never called me back for that job. So there's a lot of that. And the job wasn't even paid that much money. Like, it was like less than my teaching job, and much more work actually. So then after that, I ended up working in a private school for a while. It's another like actual school. That was probably the worst job I've ever had in Japan. It was an all-girls school, and there was so much bullying all the time, like horrific bullying, and it didn't matter if I reported about it, no one seemed to care. None of the teachers spoke to each other, all the teachers just walked around looking at the floor. There was no like art or anything on the walls. All the walls were grey. It was incredibly brutalist. It was just an awful environment, and the woman who was in charge of the English department hated me, hated the other teacher I work with, and was very controlling, and I ended up being let go from that school because that woman complained about me. And it turns out that I think, and this is something that happens quite a lot, it seems like she wanted to get like a younger, attractive male foreign teacher, and when she didn't get that, she would complain about the teachers and go through the roster until they sent one. So yeah, that was very unfair, but I'm glad that that happened because that job was honestly awful. And then I ended up doing a little bit more eikaiwa work, and then for the company I actually work for now, there was like something called a corporate sales department, and what they would do is that they would send me to companies to teach, and this was often at night. The thing is about this is like the pay per hour is very high, so I think it's like hourly fee is like 5,000 yen, but then you'd only get like 1 or 2 lessons a day, and they're very, very far away, and you have to prepare a lot for them. So although it seems really good initially, I wasn't making enough money because I wasn't getting enough lessons. And I would teach at I taught at hotels teaching the staff, I taught at companies teaching like the board of directors, I taught at NTT, I taught at Hitachi where we did a seminar, and I taught at like a taxi company teaching the taxi drivers. So it's very, very varied and very interesting, but very stressful, and I just wasn't making enough money even though the pay per hour is really, really high, so I had to stop doing that. After that, I ended up doing my longest job in Japan, was where I worked in another private school. This was under another company that I applied for, and this company was pretty famous for having just like a good salary, so I applied for them. And they needed a set amount, I think it was like 5 years of experience in teaching before you could apply. So I waited till I have 5 years and I applied and I got the job. I ended up working for that school for 6 years, so it was really good. The pay was great, the hours weren't very long, and I got to make the whole curriculum for the school, and I felt like generally I was making a difference. And all in all, I really liked that school. I have another video about this, but like I had another issue with the women I work with because I work with a Japanese teacher, and it was hard because it was not stated that either of us were assistants, and she couldn't stand the idea of working with a foreign person at the same level. So there was always this kind of like power struggle, and of course when you're working with teachers, sometimes there's like a little bit of jealousy about who the kids like more, blah 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 blah. So there was a few issues like that. It didn't end very well, but all in all I felt positive about that job, and while I was there I really enjoyed it. While I was working in that job, I did actually start making a YouTube channel. I made that channel because before my mom died, I wanted to show her what I was doing in Japan, and I wanted an easy way to do that. So I actually made a YouTube channel just to show my mom what I was doing. And I also wanted to get better at speaking, and I thought that would be a very good way to do it. So that's when I made my YouTube channel, and I didn't realize that people would enjoy watching the videos, and eventually it ended up becoming a source of income for me. That's another one of my favorite things I ended up doing that I didn't think I would do, because I ended up finding a very wonderful community, and we made a Discord, and I've made a lot of wonderful friends and memories. So that was honestly great, and obviously I'm still making YouTube videos now. So that was a nice little unexpected bonus. So yeah, like at this point, because I worked at the private school for 6 years, right, and that was a big chunk of what I was doing. In that time I also had a bunch of side jobs, and one of them was I was helping to translate indie games. I worked for a Japanese game studio that produced indie games, and the team itself was really, really small. I think the actual team was like 5 people. So yeah, we ended up working for them, and we translated some of their titles, and some of them ended up becoming very popular. They're very neat, and they have kind of like a niche, and they have a cult following, so they're not like super popular AAA titles or anything, but yeah, I'm proud of what we did, and that actually ended up being very lucrative. Translating can get you a lot of money, and it can earn you not a lot of money. It really depends on what you're doing. This company was very, very nice, and I ended up earning quite a lot of money from that, and that's how I was able to like move and do all these things. But what happened is that like one of their titles ended up being crazy popular, and they ended up making enough money that they could just quit the studio and retire. And last I heard, the CEO moved to Kazakhstan, and like he's living in Kazakhstan now. So so he's literally following his dream. So I was really happy for them, but at the same time, that meant that I couldn't work for them anymore because the studio didn't exist. That was also a little stressful because we'd have to create the translation, and we'd have meetings with them, and we'd have to explain why we did certain things. And there's a lot of things in translation where it's like, do you want to keep it very Japanese, or do you want to make it more Western, blah 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 blah, and it really depends on the company you're working with. But yeah, it was really fun. One of my favorite things I did up until now. So after I ended up being let go from my private school job, I ended up, because it was ended badly and the company felt bad and the school felt bad, they actually gave me a very nice severance package. So I had quite a lot of money that could sustain me for my next job search. But I feel like compared to 10 years ago when I first arrived, I feel like there's even less jobs now. Like maybe because there's so many more people here, but I couldn't really find anything. So I decided to go back to my old eikaiwa company, and I've been working there, and I actually just work there part-time. I work like 4 days a week, and then on my other days I can do stuff like YouTube, tourism, like any other little small side jobs that I find. This isn't for everyone, but it works for me, particularly because I like to have lots of little projects going on at one time. And working in eikaiwa is very hard for me. I don't think I could do it full time because sometimes I finish work at like 9 o'clock and then I don't get home until 10. And it's just not very good for your body, it's not very good for your diet, and particularly in the winter months you don't see a lot of sunlight. So if like I would recommend not doing eikaiwa full time for your mental health, like personally for me. Something I also got into, and I'm sure if you guys watch the channel you know that I started working for a Japanese company designing clothes. This is another one, maybe my favorite job that I had so far. I just started working there. They were looking for influencers who also had a design background because they wanted someone who could design clothes, take pictures of the clothes, edit the pictures, post them on SNS. Again, it's a very small company, so they wanted kind of like a jack of all trades, and I was the only foreigner of the designers that they chose on the team, so I had to also do like translation and stuff like that. It was very fun, and I got to make a lot of clothes that I really liked. And we ended up selling out everything, so I'm very happy for that. Right now, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but the company I'm working for, Mumi, is actually on a little bit of a hiatus because, as I mentioned it before, and a lot of Japanese fashion companies run like this, it's like a main company and a conglomerate of smaller ones, which is annoying because if the other companies don't do well, that leaves less money for you. And I think right now the company and the other companies are not doing so well, so they're thinking about what to do with the future of the company, so they're putting all of their projects on hold. They apologized to me a lot about that because they said they were really happy with everything we did. And it made me sad initially, but I know that like now I have experience doing designing and like working with the factories and the textilers and stuff like that. I actually did get a lot of experience in the last 2 years, and I feel like I want to design some more stuff in the future, maybe works with some more different companies. And yeah, that's where we're at. There's obviously been a lot of smaller things in between. If I think of them, maybe I'll make another video on it. Let me know if you have any questions. One thing I want to say is that like since I've been in Japan, a lot of people have kind of like made snide comments or like talked down to me because I work in English teaching. And I actually like being an English teacher. I wouldn't want to do it full time anymore, mainly because I've been here for 10 years and I've been doing it for 10 years. But I love being able to speak to different people. I love the fact that you can walk around, that you can play games, that you can get creative, that you can take some of the skills you have from outside of the classroom and apply it inside. I've met a lot of amazing people. Some of my students I still speak to. Some of my students ended up like going and living in Hawaii and Canada and like America, and then they'll send me postcards and they'll be like, thank you so much, I couldn't have done this without you. So it's very rewarding for me. I can understand how it's not for everyone. But like a lot of people who move to Japan, they all want to be like, I don't know, like famous or like models, or they want to earn tons of money in like very specific fields, and that's fine. But at the same time, I come from a very working class family. I really don't think there's any shame in any kind of job you're doing. Like as long as like it's something that you're enjoying, it's not bothering you, and you're making the money that you need, then honestly just get that bag. Oh yeah, of course there's stuff like maid cafes and stuff like that that are something that a lot of foreigners want to do, but it's very, very hard to do it on a visa. Like, but I did dabble in it. Like, I've done little maid cafe events and stuff like that, and that was pretty fun. But I think overall where I'm doing right now suits me a lot, because it's like I can do lots and lots of little different things. But it really depends on the person. Definitely for most people, I think just having one full-time job where your salary is always constant is probably the best. So yeah, let me know what you think, and once again, if you have any questions, let me know. If you want any more deeper video on any of the jobs that I have mentioned, let me know. But yeah, that's it for now. I wish you the best in your endeavors. I hope that you're enjoying the work you're doing now, and if you're deciding to move to Japan, yeah, I wish you the best of luck. Everyone's pathway here is different, and don't feel bad if like initially the job that you're doing isn't the one you want. Sometimes it's just like a process. So yeah, thank you for watching. As always, please subscribe. Bye!